Hey guys, welcome back to more Reddit stories about awful neighbors. In today's Ripestories video, OP says, I don't own a gun, but yesterday my neighbor called the police claiming I was firing shots at someone. He wanted to see me in handcuffs, but when the officers actually showed up, the story took a totally different turn. Let's dive right into the video. And the first one is titled, My Neighbor Liked to Clean. So this happened in 2001. I had just moved to a quiet neighborhood where my children 1 and 3 could play outside safely and grow up with neighborhood children. It was also nice for my cats, 3, to finally be able to run outside. After the first week, it was our first garbage day, everything neatly in closed bags and in our personal garbage container. In the morning we had to place the container on the side of the road with the rest of the containers on our street. So I put it there at 7, after which I started cleaning my house. I had a white floor because I liked it, and that way I knew for sure that it was clean. I mopped daily and I was still extremely clean at that time because of crawling children. Then I did the shopping, and when I got home I was in shock after opening my front door. My entire hall was full of unknown waste, clearly stuffed through the letterbox. I already saw a number of neighbors looking at me expectantly behind their windows and in front of their house. It was clear that they knew more. After asking around, I was told who had thrown that garbage in my house. Conscious neighbor had done this with much fanfare. Something snapped inside me, a bomb in my frontal lobe, and all decency disappeared from my mind. Steam from my ears. I cleaned out the trash and put the kids in the living room. Then I cleaned the cat litter box. Normally, I throw the contents in a bag, but now I was a bit more precise. I only scooped the crap and urine clumps out of the box and divided it evenly into 2 small bags, 1 kilogram each, those thin ones that tear quickly. I took the bags and went to the neighbor further down the street. I rang the doorbell and kept the bags behind me. The lady opened the door with a smug grin on her face. The door opened wide and I could quickly see her hall. On the right, a carpeted staircase. On the left, the open door to the living room. The hall continued for another 1.5 meters or so to the back, after the stairs and door where the toilet was, and everything was super clean. I asked her devilishly calmly if she had put that waste through my letterbox, and her answer was yes, followed by the reasoning that because I was new here, that the loose waste that was lying around the place containers must have been mine, because before we lived here, that never happened. That was the moment that all the blood vessels in my eyes burst. The calm was gone. In a tirade of abuse, I made it clear to her that I'd not been the polluter, and that if she had any decency, she could have spoken to me instead of jumping to conclusions and dirtying my house and endangering my crawling children and animals by dumping that waste in my house like that. With the message that she liked to clean up so much, here please, and I threw the 2 bags in her hallway. One high against the corner of the stairs and the other on the doorpost of the living room. Everything was covered in poop and the splattered clumps of cat urine, with a warning/promise that if she ever thought of doing something like that again, I would smash all her windows. I turned around and went home. Everyone had seen and heard everything, never heard anything from that neighbor again. No one ever thought of doing something like that to me again. However, I can still enjoy the face she pulled when she saw the bags flying. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments, do you think OP went too far here, or is the revenge just perfect? Let me know what you think in the comments, and by the way, if you enjoy the neighbor stories, please don't forget to like the video, because that would help me tremendously. Thanks a lot. The next one is another neighbor story, which is titled, I saved 5 years of discarded dog bones and returned them to my neighbor. Occasionally, while cutting grass, I would find small chunks of bones scattered about my backyard, maybe once every other month. The kind someone would give to their dog to gnaw on. My yard is fenced in though, and all of my neighbors only have 1 big enough dogs for that kind of thing, so I had my suspicions already about who was responsible here, but I never knew for sure. It was honestly just a mild inconvenience, but I always just picked them up and tossed them inside this little storage container. Over the years, I accrued quite a collection of them, and one day I came home from work in the early afternoon, and as I was pulling into my driveway, I saw something get lobbed over the shared fence with my neighbor, who I always suspected of doing this. Older guy, I think he was cutting grass or something, and I'm guessing he didn't want to run it over with his mower, and instead of acting like a human being and disposing of it properly, he just throws it in my backyard because he is a piece of work. Now, I pride myself on being a reasonable person, but I can also be a petty, vindictive little a-hole under the right circumstances, and I could call him out on it, yeah, and he might stop, or he might do it more just to be a prick, so I decided to just return his bones, and if he wanted to have a conversation about it afterwards, we could absolutely do that. Fast forward to sundown, I go outside and proceed to throw probably 100 bone chunks over the fence over the course of half an hour. There was something deeply satisfying about it, cathartic even. A week or so later we see each other when we are both leaving our homes. I had only laid eyes on the guy maybe 2 or 3 times in the 5 years I've lived there, night shift hours. I would characterize his facial expression as severely disgruntled. I couldn't stop smiling though. He didn't say a word about it. How could he? He would have to acknowledge that what he had been doing for years, haven't seen a bone since. And the next one is a fantastic title story, which is titled "My Neighbors Called the Cops on Me and Got Himself Arrested." So for context, I, 26 female, and my husband, 32M, and our daughter, 5 female, live in an apartment complex on the ground floor. We live in a mountain area, so our breezeway is closed off on one side, leaving us to share it with only one other neighbor. A week ago, I called the police to file a report because I had $100 to $200 worth of car supplies stolen from my front door within a 3-hour period of time. When they asked me who I suspected, I did tell them that my neighbors, due to the fact that I had our cop neighbor check his cameras and no one was seen coming or going from our breezeway, and I also pointed out to the officer that they get the cops called and at least one of them will get arrested regularly. Well, it turns out there was a protective order put in place 2 weeks prior against her boyfriend when he got arrested. The cops put 2 and 2 together and sent a patrol car to catch him there. Needless to say, this started a small war. Small things here and there have been done, such as screaming at us, blaring their security system every time I open my front door, nothing but small inconveniences. Up until yesterday, that is. So I left to go pick my daughter up from school and was gone for about an hour to an hour and a half. When I pulled into the apartments, I noticed a patrol car parked near the entrance and the boyfriend was there with his dogs talking to the cops and violently started pointing at my car. I pulled up next to the officer and rolled down my window asking if I could help with anything. He instructed me to park near his partner. His partner informed me that they had called the cops saying they heard gunshots through their security camera and gave my description saying I might have shot someone. The crazy thing is I don't even own a gun. I told the officer this along with the fact that I've been gone for the last hour and a half, and he asked why I thought they would call and say such things, and I told him I believed it was retaliation for last week. Well, the neighbor ended up being detained and his dogs were taken away by animal control, and now his girlfriend is going around to our neighbors saying I got him arrested and got their dogs taken away. The funny thing is, I don't remember calling the police yesterday, but I guess I got him arrested, guys. There was so much more before all this, but I just wanted to keep the post as direct and to the point as I could. And yeah guys, people always say just ignore them when it comes to bad neighbors, but anyone who has lived in an apartment knows that is not always possible. If you share a space with someone who wants to make your life miserable, they can make every single trip to the mailbox feel like a hostage negotiation. And by the way guys, if you've ever dealt with awful, terrible, entitled neighbors, let us know about it in the comments. We would love to hear your story. And someone in the Reddit comments said, you need to contact your apartment management immediately and provide them with the police reports from both incidents, the protective order violation, the theft report, and the false gunshot claim. Most standard leases have a nuisance or criminal activity clause, and if they are bringing the police to the complex multiple times in a month and getting arrested, management can start the eviction process. Don't wait for this to escalate. Get it in writing that you are reporting their behavior to the landlord. You got a kid. You cannot be dealing with a neighbor who thinks calling in fake shootings is an appropriate response to a disagreement. And another Reddit comment said, the part that would actually scare me most is not even the theft, it is actually the fake gunshot call. That is how somebody ends up face down in a parking lot because dispatch tells officers there may be a weapon involved. This is not neighborly beef anymore. This is start making a folder with dates, times, videos, police report numbers, and emails to the landlord territory. And the next one is a beautiful malicious compliance story, which is titled, You Need Scan Guns? Hold on, let me get you fired first. So this started earlier today when my coworker approached me after working on the floor, informing me of how Kevin approached him in regards to scan guns that he said he needs ready by today. Scan guns that, for starters, we do not have available, but I'll explain that in a moment. First, let me tell you a little bit about Kevin so you know exactly what I'm dealing with here. Kevin is this company's plant manager and he's, for a lack of a better term, abrasive. If I can describe him better, he's the type of manager that loves to micromanage his employees while demanding the most out of everyone and anyone when he feels that he needs something important done, and this is where our situation came in. So, long story short, Kevin wanted the Omni scan guns that shipping mainly uses for inventory to be used by his employees to track pallets to ensure that they are accurate. Sounds reasonable, right? Well, I thought so too, and even if he had that out the blue. Well, as soon as I found out today, things soon escalated the way they did, and while I wished things were handled better, I did things the best that I could do in the end, so there are not any real regrets here. So steering back to the situation, Kevin told my coworker that the other 2 scan guns, because the company only had 3, were either broken or unaccountable. Well, that obviously did not sit well with either of us, because now to remedy that, he wanted the scan guns we had on reserve for a special project to be used for his project. My coworker recorded the conversation, which will be used later, and asked if I can step in to talk with him, so I did. Walking to the area Kevin was in, I can see that I was not alone. Not that it really mattered since my business was with him. I addressed Kevin, the situation with the scan guns, and per our IT policy, we must determine the status of the guns, why one is broken, why the other is missing, how broken is the gun, why was there no better accountability made for our assets, etc. Well, Kevin, in his own fashion, did not have an answer for me, but instead told me to go ask whoever had the guns and find out why. I looked at him dead in the eyes and asked him, "Sir, isn't this your project? Shouldn't you be held accountable since the equipment was under your care at the time?" Well, obviously, Kevin somehow took offense to that, as he felt that I was being disrespectful to him and that how dare I put him on the spot like that. So as always in situations like this, I decided to call my boss and inform him of the situation and asked for his input. Putting my phone on speaker, my boss informed Kevin that he cannot accommodate what he wants simply because we do not have what he wants, nor can it be done the same day. Kevin then suggested the scan guns that we have reserved for that special project. My boss obviously told him no, as he will not be allocating assets for a project to fill his needs. Kevin tried to dispute this, saying that he wanted this done today. My boss said, and I quote this happily, "Well, if you had enough foresight to inform us of this project sooner, we would have been able to accommodate you better. Keep in mind that per our policy, should the plant have any and all projects that will involve IT-related assets and/or information, it must be coordinated with the IT department prior to deployment to ensure a seamless transition. You did not, and therefore, you gotta accept the consequences as someone in the management should." Keep in mind also that prior to calling my boss, I was recording my convo with Kevin because anyone here on this subreddit knows that CYA is absolutely essential. I then proceeded to resume recording, giving Kevin the illusion that I was hanging up with my boss, which I did, but he didn't need to know all the deeds. I then asked Kevin if there was anything else he needed from me, to which he had a bit of a grump and told me that he found me to be very unreasonable, basically saying that I was not doing my job properly and that if it were up to him, he would fire me on the spot for being so incompetent. Sure, Kevin. Keep feeding me that delicious info. So I went back to my office to see what I can wrap up on for the day when I got a call from my HR manager to report to her office. And you already know where this is going, but we are coming to the conclusion here, so buckle up. I walk in there and sure enough, Kevin is there with a smug look on his face. My HR manager told me that Kevin informed her that he found my conduct with him to be very disrespectful and that I refused to accommodate him with what he needed or gave a valid excuse why. It's no surprise here, but I was ready for this. Prior to even showing up, I had my coworker email me the recording he had with Kevin, since by that time he had left work and went home. Along with my recordings, I had what I needed, but I wanted to put the cherry on top. So after a quick text to my boss, he showed up with the most serious expression I've ever seen him in. Keep in mind also that he was supposed to be starting his vacation, and getting dragged in for Kevin's BS didn't sit well with him. So after Kevin said his piece and I said mine, the HR manager turned to me and said, "OP, do you have any evidence that dismisses Kevin's accusations?" With the most professional-looking smug look on my face, I told her I did. So I pulled out my phone and pulled up the 2 recordings that both my coworker and I had with our conversation with Kevin. So after listening to the convos, Kevin's expression went from smug to as if he saw a ghost. Without much to say, the HR manager turned to Kevin and told him, "How can you even say such a thing to someone here? OP has been one of our most dedicated workers here. Being in the job that he's in, he has a lot on his plate to contend with." It is also policy that his manager enforces that they don't keep surplus equipment if it's not meant to be utilized to its fullest extent. That is why we order through them to supply exactly what we need. Your conduct towards him does not merit any actual justification through our callous words and berating him in the manner that you took. Afterwards, I stepped out with my boss, while HR manager doles out what she felt was necessary to Kevin. Not long afterwards, he left her office without saying a word to either my boss or I. Going back into her office, we were told that Kevin already had a history of this sort of thing happening, but without any substantial evidence, they could not can him. We did, and it was more than enough along with the paper trail stacked against him to get his butt fired. Again though, this happened just today, so I'm feeling a mix of anxiety, joy, and some sadness for Kevin. In some misguided way, I know he was just trying to do his job, but I wished he could have handled things better. Anyway, thanks for reading guys, and have a good one. And the next one is another great malicious compliance story. This one is titled, "Pay for 20 hours of work, get 20 hours of work." I will begin by saying that I work for a software company. I was working on a project for a client to customize part of the software and stuff, and the project was super open-ended, mostly because the client kept changing their mind about what they wanted, so the contract was time and materials, meaning I had an hourly rate and I would log all the time worked on the project in half-hour intervals, and every week my company would bill the client company for the hours spent on the project. The client said they didn't care how much effort it took, they just wanted a good product and they wanted it before the end of the year so they could present it at their big internal meeting. At the beginning, the project went great. Every week I had a meeting with the client and I would get feedback on the progress as well as new requests they might have, and then I would spend however long it took to implement the changes. I would bill them 15 hours, 20 hours, 25 hours, or however many it had been. Slowly over time, the client started requesting more and more. I told him during the meeting, this feature will require X days of work. Changing that will require Y more days, and so on, but again the client insisted they needed all those extra features. They also complained that the project was not advancing quickly enough and insisted they needed the project completed before the end of the year. I talked to my manager and explained the situation. To be able to finish quickly enough, I needed to work full-time on this project, and my manager moved my other projects to different people, and we told the client that until the end of the year I would work either full-time on the project to ensure we will hit all the deadlines, and the client was overjoyed for about a month. The following month, the client is pissed and is demanding to know why we are charging them so much. I pull out my timesheets and explain that, as agreed, I've been working full-time and more on their project. Every week I've logged between 45 and 50 hours of work, and I've detailed notes specifying exactly how I have spent that time. I'm not particularly concerned about being accused of stealing time because I'm a fast worker and most tasks have been completed more quickly than the original estimates. Besides, I point out that I'm now working twice as many hours as before, so it's costing the client twice as much per week, but I'm also completing tasks twice as quickly and will be finished in half the time. The client, unfortunately, does not appreciate my use of logical reasoning, and they accuse my company of taking advantage, and they say that starting from next week they no longer want to pay more for than 20 hours of work per week. I tell them, sure, we can do that, but it's October already and you want the project completed by the end of the year. Given the amount of work still left to do, I will need more hours to finish. The client does not let me explain and says that we are not to bill them for anything more than 20 hours per week, and they will not pay us for more than 20 hours per week, and they want this in writing or else they'll cancel the entire project. And my manager says, of course, the customer is always right. This was, by the way, an evil act of malicious compliance, so please read until the end before getting angry at my manager. He is a great guy. So my manager sends the client an email confirming that starting from date YXZ, my engagement with them will be kept at a maximum of 20 hours per week. He also attaches a spreadsheet of the estimated time to develop all the new features of the project, how many hours I'd spent so far, and how many hours I projected to spend to complete it. The client smugly acknowledges this, and before the end of the week, my manager gives me back my other project as well as a new one. You see, at the time we were understaffed because we were growing too quickly and we were getting more requests for new projects that we could handle, so there would have been no point in stealing hours from his client and pissing them off when we can just take on a couple of new clients instead and bill everyone for the actual work and keep everyone happy. So starting from next week, my new schedule is 20 hours with pissy client, 10 hours with client B, and 15 hours with client C. It works great for me, but it doesn't work that great for pissy client. At our next weekly meeting, one of the features they requested is not ready yet, and at the following meeting I tell them we will need to move the deadline for the next milestone by 2 weeks. Then it is the beginning of December and they ask me if I would be able to make some last-minute changes and still deliver the project by the end of the year, and I say, oh, there's no way the project can be finished by the end of the year. We have yet another meeting with the client and my manager asks me why I'm missing this huge deadline. I say, do you remember when I was talking about all the work that still needed to be done and how long it would take? In October, we estimated the project needed another 60 days of work. I worked 10 days in October, 10 in November, and because you said 20 hours max per week, it is gonna take about 40 more days of work to finish the project. It is December by now. Even if I work overtime, there are not 40 days left before the end of the year, and the manager is like, yep, makes perfect sense. The client does the shocked Pikachu face. They basically act like this is the first time they've heard about not being able to meet the deadlines, even though I've been telling them for weeks, and unfortunately, they are the kind of person who never listens to what they don't want to hear. At first they wanted the work done quickly, so they didn't think that if I worked more hours, I would bill them for more hours. Then they wanted to be billed for fewer hours, so they didn't consider that I would work fewer hours on the project and things would get done much more slowly. Well, unfortunately for the client who would like to pretend that we were springing this on them at the last minute, we had tons of emails to show that we had told them well in advance about this. My manager's email back in October had even included an estimate of when the project would be completed based on the number of hours worked per week. Our ass was well and truly covered. Now for the fallback though, the client kicked and screamed and demanded that I go back to work on their project full-time, or even that my company should provide a second person to help me meet the deadline at the end of the year. It is January and the project is still unfinished, so you can guess how well that went. The client had to move the big presentation of the new software and was not happy about it, and about having to explain it all to their own CEO, but we told them very nicely that in corporate tones to pound sand. I was already scheduled to work on 2 other projects for the next few months, and it had been hard enough to put me full-time on this project the first time. My manager is not gonna leave another 2 clients hanging, especially not to please this pissy client who keeps changing their mind and threatens to cancel their contract every other week. As a company, we do our best to keep the client happy, but honestly, there's a limit to just everything, especially when someone goes out of their way to not listen when we try to explain how cause and effect works. And the next one is a petty revenge story which is titled Nice Neighbor. So over the past few years, our apartment management has really gone down the toilet. We can no longer ever get a call through to anyone in the office. They hide away and won't answer the door some days. Well, one neighbor is particularly pissed. Their lease renewal is due on Monday, aka tomorrow, and they have attempted to contact them for over a month. And her rent is also jumping to $899 from $595 for a 1-bedroom. And by the way, the 1-bedroom is tiny, no washer and dryer in the unit. This is a crazy jump. Well, anyway, her petty revenge is sitting in the laundromat telling people how to only spend 25 cents on a load of laundry. If they are ever gonna F her over, she is going to F them over. And by the way, guys, it is absolutely crazy that that is allowed to let the rent jump from $595 to $899. That's a ridiculous increase. Anyway, thanks for watching. I will see you again tomorrow.